Hello, good people, and welcome to Finance Skills Hub. Here we learn, we connect, and we grow. We continue with our series on how to analyze data in Excel using cube functions. If you have joined us in the previous editions, we've covered the advantages of using cube functions. Regular pivot tables has its own features and advantages, but there are situations where you need to lay out your final report or dashboard in a particular way. Cube functions allow you to insert rows and columns in your final pivot table report if you like. You can also draw your measures directly into your cell, add slicers, and all those other features. And that is why we like cube functions. Now, in this video, we are going to explore 6 out of the 7 cube functions in Excel. We are going to use practical case studies and examples so that you understand how it works. Maybe you haven't explored it, so after this video you probably get a clearer view on how these functions can help you save time and work smart at the office. So if you're game, join me in Excel and let's go through this together. Okay, so this is the final dashboard we hope to build together. Now, this dashboard was built entirely with cube functions. There were no pivot tables here. It still has the interaction, so if I click on a particular segment, okay, you see that it responds. Okay, I have all my calculations responding like that. I mean, we've covered this in detail, but in this short video, what we want to do is to cover all the 6 cube functions. I mean, there are 7 of them, right? But practically, we can use 6 in Excel. So if you start with cube, you realize that there are 7: cube KPI member, cube member, cube member property, cube rank member, CUBESET, CUBESET count, and cube value. Very, very simple functions. So before we go into it, I just want to give you an overview and what each function represents and how we can use it. Okay, so at the heart of all the cube functions is what we call the CUBESET. Sets are made up of items, right? So to relate it to our table here, if you have a table, look at a set like a column, right? So here, my month column can be a set because it contains at least more than one item, right? So cube sets can be any of these. It could also be a set of measures as well, right? So if you are using CUBESET, then the basic idea is that you are going into a column or a set that contains a list of items, right? Now, when you have CUBESET, what's the items that are in these CUBESET are called cube members. So again, back to our example, if I come here, okay, the months that you see here are members of that set. So usually if you want to use unique, right, what unique does is that it can give you a list of the unique items in here. So if I use unique, I have 4. So these are the members of the set. So that is cube members. Now, beyond knowing the cube members, we could also count the number of members in each set, right? So if you know sets and then you know members, how many items are in there? It plays this role as well. So again, to relate it to our example here, I could basically count here, right? And then run a count A around this, okay? So here I'm just showing you simple ways for you to relate. So this 4 you see here can be CUBESET count, basically telling us that we have 4 items in our set, right? So CUBESET, cube member, CUBESET count. Now, apart from knowing this, there's also cube ranked member. Now, we need to also know the order that our members are arranged in our sets. Okay, so example, if I have a list of months, okay, I could have, let's say, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, if I want to know which item is number 1, okay, practical terms, I can use index over this array, okay, and then ask which one is number 1. It tells me it's October, right? Cube rank member allows us to do something like this. Allows us to pull the members of a set based on their order or their layout or their ranking. This is particularly useful when you are using slices and all that, or you want to list the members of your set in a particular order. So again, we'll learn how to do this very soon, right? So you now know CUBERANKEDMEMBER, and then the next one is CUBEKPIMEMBER. You know, if you're using data models in Excel, you can actually create KPIs. KPIs allow you to track performance. Think of it as targets. So as an example, I have a profit margin. The target is that I need to be measuring all those transactions that gave us more than 25%. I can put in, if you like, a conditional format that would highlight green for all those that were able to cross the 25% mark. CUBEKPIMEMBER can bring the properties of whatever KPI that I have set. Again, in our case study, we'll see how this works, right? Now, one of the important Cube functions is CUBEVALUE, that allows us to bring aggregations or calculations from our data model, right? So think of any calculation that you can do in your data model: sum, total sales, total cost, profit margin. These essentially are calculations. We do them with measures, right? So as a very simple example, I can come in here and then run a sum, okay, on this cost. Now this aggregation, I can easily pull it using CUBEVALUEs, right? So this is just to present an overview of how these work. Okay, so we can practically use 6 out of these 7 functions in a typical Excel environment. Now let's go and apply this to our case study and then see how we can use this to analyze our data. Okay, so we want to start using the Cube functions that you saw earlier. All you need in Excel to use the Cube functions or create Cube formulas is to create a data model, right? A data model is a very simple thing to create. So like an example, if I have this single table that has sales transactions, I can simply create a data model by going through the pivot table process. So I want to insert a pivot table on this data set. Okay, now in the process, I can just add this data to the data model. So that's all you need to do, right? So if I add this to the data model, what's going to happen is that a copy of this is created in the Power Pivot environment. Okay, so this is the Power Pivot. If I come here, this, right, is my Power Pivot environment, and you see that the table is here. If I go to diagram view, I still have this single table here. You have situations where you have several dimension tables and fact tables. You're allowed to have that. So the basic requirement is to just have the data model. In this case, we can represent it with a cube. Now our goal is to use these cube functions to draw some key aggregations, okay, or attributes from this cube from the side. Now for the data model or the cube, these are pre-calculated, right? In the past, it was done this way so that it was easy to get your calculations in the data model easily without looping through the entire data set, right? So once we have our data model, we can now start drawing calculations from the side. Now let's learn how to do this. So if you look at our complete work, this is the calculations that are driving the dashboard here. And you realize that we have some cube sets here, and then we have the cube set count, we have CUBERANKEDMEMBER, and then we have the cube members also here giving us the cube values. So that's how we are going to approach this. But to help you understand, okay, I'm going to use a version of this report. Okay, and then we start off by inserting a pivot table, right? I already have this data set in a data model. So if you already do, you can now come and then insert a pivot table, this time around from the data model. So I'll use the data model, put my pivot table in this existing worksheet. Of course, it brings my fields to the right. Now, you observe that all my tables or fields are here, right? So let me just, the report I want to create is to see or summarize my revenue, my cost, and then my profit margin, right? So over here, we calculated this earlier as measures. So my total revenue is here, my total cost is here, and then my profit margin is also here. Now, as I check these, you realize that they are placed in the value section. Okay, I want to analyze or slice this by month. So I'll come to my calendar. In the more fields area, I have my month here. I'll drag this to rows. Okay, so this is your regular pivot tables. Now I mentioned that the difficulty with using this layout is that maybe in your dashboard, you want to separate the quarters, okay? And then maybe put in some narration or subtotals and all that. There are several reasons to distort the original layout for your pivot tables, right? But regular pivot tables will not allow me to insert a row or modifications to this shape, right? So the best way to do this is now to convert this pivot table. Okay, under the pivot table analyze, when you come to OLAP tools, convert this to formulas, right? So if I convert this to formulas, you realize that this is no more a pivot table. If I had slices, I could still be analyzing using the slices. But what has left behind are these formulas. So you have cube members here. So I told you cube members are items in a set, right? And then we have our cube values here, which are our calculations. Okay, and then across we also have a set of cube members. Okay, cube members can also be a list of measures as well, right? So we want to create this from scratch, right? So let's learn how to do that. Now, to be able to get the list of months, we need to first create the cube set for months, right? And here we are going to use cube set. So cube set, I select that. All the cube functions will require access to the data model, which we have created already. So we are always going to initiate access to the data model or part of the data model or cube with a double quote. So once I do this, I get this workbook data model and then I close this off. Now it's active. Now when I get to the model, what am I looking for? I'm looking for a particular table or a side of the model. Again, I'll start with a double quote. It lists all the tables and measures, right? So any of these can be a set. So here, I'm looking for calendar, right? But in the calendar, I am in for the month column. So I'm going to bring a dot. So a dot will now allow you to go to the next level of the hierarchy. So here, I have all the columns in the calendar table. So this is what I'm looking for, the month. I'll select it. Okay, now in the month, it is good to be clear that you're looking for everything in there. So the normal syntax for this is to conclude this with what we call children. Okay, so now when I do this, I'm accessing all the items in that cube set called month. Okay, it has the option of a caption. So normally if I enter, I get a blank cell. So here I can name this month. Okay, so that when I click, so when I enter, right, this month is now pregnant, if you like, with the 12 months of the year, right? So this is an example of a cube set. Very simple, right? So we have a cube set here. Now let's learn about cube set count. So you remember I said that with cube set count, the basic idea is to count the number of items in there, right? So I will now go and then do a cube set count, which basically requires me to reference a set. And the set is what I've done on my left. Okay, so this is going to give me 12. So that's simple. So cube set count, cube set. Now let's look at cube rank member. So the cube rank member, think of it as index, right? So with cube rank member, which month is number 1, which month is number 2, and so on. If I want to pull a list of items from my set in an ordered way, I can use a cube rank member to get this done, right? So because I already have a set here, okay, all I need to do is to start my cube rank member. So I'll come here, cube rank member, again, access the data model. Is asking for the set expression, which is here, right? And then if I'm looking for 1, I just put in 1. Now let's see what we get. So this is going to give me January, right? If I change this to 2, February, and so on. But usually what we do is that we want to spell all the 12 months, right? So I'll come here and instead of using an absolute value 1, I can bring in sequence, right? Sequence on the cube set, so I have 12 items in there. If I can use sequence, then it means that I can have all the 12 items spelled at a go, right? So if I do this, then you realize that I have 1 to 12 spelled at a go, like that, right? So now at this point, I have used CUBERANKEDMEMBER, I've used CUBESET. I can now I've used CUBESETCOUNT. Okay, so far we have done 3 of the 6. So let's see how we can use the rest to complete our story. So we've used CUBESET, we've used CUBESETCOUNT, we've used CUBERANKEDMEMBER. Now let's do a CUBEMEMBER, right? So a CUBEMEMBER is an item in the set. Now that set can be a column, or it can also be a list of measures that you have created, right? So for this purpose, let's say we want to bring in profit margin. Okay, so I can bring in profit margin, okay, as a member of the list of measures that I have created. So again, I'll access the data model, and then if I come here, so these essentially represent the tables and the list of measures. Okay, so you see that measures here, and then in here I'm looking for this particular member, which is the profit margin. Okay, so if I close this, okay, this is my profit margin. It's a member. Now with this member, I can now find out the profit margin for January, okay, and use it in my calculation. And that is where I'm going to use CUBEVALUE. So remember, I said CUBEVALUE can be used to bring in the calculations or aggregations you've done in the data model. Right. So again, I'll access the data model, okay, and the member expression, I already have calculated this over here. Okay, so I want the profit margin. Now, if I use it this way, it's bringing the profit margin without any attribute. Okay. Now, on the side is another member, which is January. So I can also reference this one. So basically, I'm looking for the profit margin for January in this particular cell, right? If I want to copy this down, then it will make sense to lock this. So F4, this at row level, and then, well, I could also lock this at the column level, but I'm just copying it down. So this is just fine. So this gives me 25.39, and then I'll just copy this down for the rest, right? So this is CUBEVALUE. That is our 5th. Okay, so you see how easy it is to just use this to create your analysis. Now, the final thing we are going to do is to use the CUBEKPIMEMBER, right? Now, if you are using the data model or Power Pivot, right, you have a feature called KPIs, right? So with the KPIs, you can use it to track visually your targets, which values or which calculations are meeting the target and all that. So we'll start off by creating a new KPI, right? And now that KPI is going to be based on an existing measure. So this is my profit margin, right? Now, basically, I can set it to an absolute value to help me track. So if you see the list of profit margins I have here, there's a range. Okay, so it can go between maybe 20 to 25 or lower. Let's say the company wants to see the transactions that give us more than 25% and then mark it green. So my absolute value here is going to be 0.25. Okay, now if I do this, I now have this bar. Okay, now I can set the target on the bar. So they are movable. So I can just push this here. So this is my target. Anything above 25%, right, should be green. And then let's say anything between 0.20, okay, or 20%, okay, is going to be yellow. And then anything below that is going to be red. So I am setting this KPI and I'm going to click OK. Okay, so once I do that, this KPI has been registered as part of my KPIs, right? Okay, so now that we've created our KPI, we can now use the CUBEKPIMEMBER to bring in any of the property of the KPI that we created. So it's very simple. So you start with a CUBEKPIMEMBER. Okay, you access the data model. Now the expectation is that because you created a KPI, it should be available under KPI name. So this is the profit margin KPI. Okay, then I'll select this. Now, I can choose any of these options to bring in the value, the goal, or the status. So here, I'm interested in the status. The combination I'm using, was it able to meet that 25% threshold? So I'm going to put in 3 over here, and then I'll close this. Now let's see what we get. Now, if I use it this way, because I haven't introduced any parameters or attributes, it doesn't know what to bring in. So I have to wrap this around the cube value so that it's clear that I'm looking for the profit margin for January for that particular one, right? So usually for the cube KPI member, we wrap it around a cube value, right? To give us a complete story. So I will wrap this around a cube value, okay? Have the data model in there. Now the member expression is for January, okay? And then the rest of this is going to be the original cube KPI member calculation. And then I'll close this, okay? So now this one just means that for January, we're able to meet the target, okay? If I change this to 1, right? The expectation is I'm going to get the same result, okay? So because 1 represents the value itself. If I change this to 3, then I'm back to 1, which is a Boolean. So 1 means true. It met the 25% threshold, right? So let's copy this down, and then we'll see what answers we get. So 0 didn't, 1 did, right? So usually what we do is that we can wrap or put a conditional format or a 3 icon feature around this, okay? So once this is selected, I can come in here, come to conditional formatting, and then in the icon set, I can come to more rules, okay? And I use the red, yellow, green to actually see this in a more elegant way, right? So here I'm going to say that for all items that were able to meet it, they should be greater than or equal to 1, okay? So I'll put in 1 here. And then those that were not in between 1 and 0, right, that will be yellow. And then anything less than 0 is going to give us red. I'll choose to show the icon only, and then I'll click OK. Okay, so you realize that in this range, I have fairly the effect I'm looking for. Now, at this point, you may not see a red, but the good thing about this is that we can insert slicers. You know, we have slicers up here, okay? So all these cube formulas, you can insert slicers. So let's try and put in a slicer for our product segment. So I'll come in here and then put in a slicer for our product segment. Okay, and then do same. So let me just copy this down. And then do same for the one that we just did here as well. So I have my segments here as part of my calculation. The idea is to show you what happens when we slice it, right? So I'm going to bring the slicer down. Okay. So if I now click on this, you realize that this is now responsive to my slicer. I have 19.67 here. Now you realize that my cube KPI member, okay, is now responding. Okay, so you're now able to see the ones that met the threshold, the ones that are in between, which is 20 and 25%, and the ones that fell below, right? So we've covered 6 out of the 7, right? So practically you can use 6 out of the 7. The 7th one, you would have to do some extra connections in here. So CUBESET count, CUBERANKEDMEMBER, CUBEMEMBER, CUBEKPI member, and CUBEVALUE, right? So out of the 7 that we have here, we've covered 6, okay? For CUBEMEMBER property, okay, you would have to get some extra connections, which is not available in this case study. But hopefully you have so much you can do with these 6, right? The workbook will be made available in the video description. You can download and then just validate these examples as you practice. So I hope you enjoyed the ride. This is supposed to be an introduction to Cube functions. If you are really looking for case studies or real world applications, then I encourage you to get this book, Data Modeling with Microsoft Excel. So it walks you through how to get data, structure it properly, use Power Query, use Power Pivot, and Cube functions, and DAX as well. So So this is due to be released December 11th, 2023. Grab your copy, and this will walk you through raw data all the way to creating an interactive dashboard. Hope to see you in the next edition, and we'll dive deep into some other applications as well as we build our dashboard together. Thank you so much for watching.
If this video was helpful and you would like to receive more of these videos directly on your WhatsApp, you can send ad to this WhatsApp number. We'll add you to our broadcast list so you receive our videos directly. You can also visit our YouTube channel, Finance Skills Hub. All our old videos are here. Please subscribe for notification of new videos, or connect with us on any of these social media handles. Thank you so much for watching.